Okay, I hope everyone had a refreshing and talkative break. Thank you very much. Thanks to the vendors. They'll still be here after this, after the next session, and you can have a deeper chat with them if you wish. Our third speaker for the day, there were two actually, George and Nathan. Nathan Alexander is the IT director at Seafolly. He has 20 years of experience in retail. He's currently leading a fairly significant change across the Seafolly group, not just RFID, but a far deeper level of change, and that's including some significant transformation within Seafolly and the group. They've introduced a raft of changes in there, which I'll let Nathan go through. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome both Nathan Alexander and George from NOLOS to the stage. Thanks.
I think we've probably loud enough.
Yeah, I think so. Well, thank you everyone for first of all, coming today and letting us talk to you about, I guess, Seafolly's journey and how we've partnered with NOLOS around RFID and the things that we've done in that space. Before we go into the slides, as Sean pointed out, obviously leading a journey for Seafolly. But Seafolly is an organisation owned by the private equity arm of Louis Vuitton. It was originally founded by the Halas family in 1975. El Caterton is also owns a suite of brands, right? Private equity business. So R.M. Williams is another one of their brands, as is Two Times You, Hackett and Pepe oversees a lot of them. So I'm also assisting and working with R.M. Williams as well, not just Seafolly on their transformation. So I'm working across a couple of their brands, brand systems. So today was actually excellent because I got to hear obviously the journey Lululemon, City Chic has been on. Seafolly, I'll be completely honest with you, we didn't really know a lot about RFID. What we knew was we had a number of challenges around our inventory and our accuracy, but for us, we really wanted to test and learn and partner with someone that could help us not just innovate with RFID and tags, like tagging technology, but also stretch what RFID could do for our business. So everything from the scanners to smart technology, the Internet of Things, we really wanted to understand not just around our inventory, but what else was really possible with RFID. And partnering with NOLOS was really about helping stretch that around RFID.
So I'm going to be a little bit of an accessory, as you see today, because obviously you're here to listen to Nathan's story. But just to give you some brief background on NOLOS, we're a tag producer. We've been around since 1996, and to date, we did a rough calculation the other day and surprised ourselves to realise that we've produced about 20 billion tags over the past 25 odd years, and think of a brand, we probably made a tag for them. What that's taught us along the way is that the tag from a brand perspective is sort of probably the least important part, but we also think it's the most important part. So fundamentally, when you're producing a garment, that last 1% is the tag that goes on there, but it's the brand, it's the name. But also for us, it became the piece where we connected our brand protection technology, our anti-counterfeit tech, and we built in things like invisible markers. We pioneered a technology which was a world first, which was similar to what you see when you hold up a banknote, the strip that goes down the middle, that's from us. We've got everything to utilise that in the marketplace apart from banknotes, so we use it across our tagging, and we call that the smart tag. And then finally we ended up in a position where we started working with the luxury brands, and we have done now for the past 10 or 12 years. And the great thing about that was they were the early adopters of RFID, and they were tagging in the times when tags were a US dollar a piece for RFID, and it was very expensive, and they adopted, and then they went into the process of building their own software because there was no software for inventory management and control. And there was a lot of pros, but also a lot of cons. They learnt as we learnt, and we reached a point where we were comfortable enough to go from a business that was just providing tags into selling systems. And Seafolly was the first to put their hands up to say, you know what, we'd like to partner with you because we looked at what we were doing and what they were doing and the synergies for the fact that they were happy to go on a journey with us and take a holistic view. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I'll pass back to you, Nathan, as we sort of flick through the slides. But let me know where you want me to stop at any time. But let's start with, this is the most important thing, I think, from an RFID perspective.
One of the things that obviously, and you've heard, both the retailers this morning talk about it, as we move into this, we're not moving into it, we're here, the omni-channel experience for our customers and online. How do we start to tie our bricks and mortar with online? How do we get better fulfillment? How do we start to improve delivery times? And that's a very big question. And there's lots of pieces of that transformation puzzle. But a critical part for Seafolly on that journey is really around, first of all, we need to get inventory accuracy. So I heard this morning around the CFO looking at the bottom line and sort of saying, well, our numbers are okay. When it comes to inventory accuracy and omni-channel, it's more about the lost opportunity, right? So than just the inventory number on the balance sheet or in the general ledger. So for us, RFID gave us the ability to be able to make sure not only we knew what inventory we had, but it was around making sure we had the right inventory and the right size curves, especially in the right stores, because every store is actually different, right? Every buyer demographic, depending on the store location, is different. So while we had various stock models that could support that, nothing could give us the accuracy that RFID did around the actual size curves. And that's where we used like RFID to help actually get that accuracy. And what we actually found was, by doing that, we were actually increasing our sales, because people were going into the store, and instead of previously going in and not being able to have their size or their colour, they were actually going in now, and we were able to fulfil the correct size curve based on their needs. So that was a key benefit for us around omni-channel. But if we come back to the technology again that SOLOS implemented, we did a few things. We implemented roof scanners in our store. We tagged all the product to start with at store, because we weren't ready yet to tag the product at manufacture, which is where we're going. So we tagged all the product in store. We used Intel embedded roof scanners as well as handheld scanners. And the reason we did this is we wanted, again, to learn and understand what the best technology was going to be for Seafolly. We didn't actually know, so we wanted to test both solutions. So this is one of our store staff literally scanning the store, and they can scan the store in about 10 minutes. Previously, they used to do a stock take in store, and we would have to bring in extra staff. They would work on the weekend. We would have 7 staff counting stock, and we would do that every 3 months across 80 stores globally. That's a massive overhead. Whereas with RFID, with 98 to 99% accuracy, we can scan the store in 10 minutes. That's using the handheld scanners. And George can talk to this, but more exciting is, and that's a great solution. But the roof scanners, the Intel roof scanners that we actually use, automates that process altogether. Literally, the store staff, at a push of the button on the POS, can scan the entire store within that same accuracy and do that in about 5 minutes. So they don't even have to use the handheld devices. So as far as an opportunity, there's more efficiency gain in using roof scanners. But again, that's a trade-off with your business around whether you want to make the investment in capital in doing those things, or whether you want to use just handheld scanners. But we did both, so we could get an understanding of how both technologies worked.
And I think, just to add to that, the SOLOS element, I guess, is, again, coming back to the tag, the core differentiator for us as a company is that we think there's a lot of great hardware and software out there. On the tagging side, it's very much conformist in the sense that there are a plethora of companies providing a tag, which is RFID. It's a metal tag. It's either stuck on the hang tag or embedded in the hang tag, and that's about all you're going to see. What we've been focusing on investing in through communications with our customers is that they would like the tag to be embedded with the label. So what we developed was a world's first patent pending RFID tag, which is carbon fiber. It's washable. it would be heat sealed onto the back of the label, and it stays with the garment. Now, why that's so profound is as follows. Because you get all the standard things that we're talking about with RFID, but where it gets interesting now is that we can actually start to look at, and that's quickly the process, which is basically embedding the tag, as I mentioned. But I'm just going to jump slides for a second because I want to show you something which is key to this. This is what we're looking at now. So we've got multiple labels on a garment, and we know what that's like, particularly the anti-theft piece, your hang tag. Your care instructions, which fundamentally now for international brands are starting to look like a book, a concertina of labels in, typically 70 or 80 languages, which is not particularly great, particularly with brands like yours for swimsuits.
Absolutely.
Doesn't look pretty on the shelf.
No.
What we're talking about is eventually coming to one unique label, and this is where the connectivity happens. So we are patent pending RFID and NFC together, embedded with the garment. So effectively, if you want to get your care instructions, you can tap onto the garment and you can get that information. You can get your size information, which means as you're standing near a rack, we're connected at the hip with these things nowadays, so we can hold that up and we can have a look at the size without having to go through the whole process of finding that. The care instruction information, choose the language of your choice, but at the same time, I'm going to push you a notification within GDPR rules. I'll push you that notification to offer you an upsell or cross-sell with what you've purchased. So that's what we're about, and that connectivity is what we started on a journey with Seafolly, and it was core and tantamount for us to take a slower process with them, because right now the company's in a process of completely revamping their tagging profile, so that we can start to fit these things in. And as we say, the beautiful piece to that is it starts to do away with these terrible care instructions on swimsuits.
It's actually a really good point that George points out. As we went down this journey with SOLOS, we actually absolutely had that problem. We have multiple swing tags on our garments, and all these tags that we have cost money. We've got multiple languages now. So when we actually started to go through this process and start to tag the product in store, we started to look at all of these labels that we had on the garments, and that actually led us to the next piece in this project, which is we're now saying, okay, how do we actually start to consolidate all of our tagging and labeling, reduce those costs? Because it's, believe it or not, you might think 5 cents, for a label on every garment. You add that up over millions and millions of products globally, it's actually a considerable cost. So for us, it actually then pushed us into another part of the project, which is how do we start to standardize our tagging, and how can RFID help us do that? So we're still compliant, we still provide all of the information that the customer requires, which is care instructions, multi-language, multi-pricing. How do we provide all that information but try to do it digitally? And that's what George is assisting Seafolly with now.
We've got a little bit of a glitch on this slide, but I'll sort of talk you through it. What was essentially happening there was, and this was something that was requested by the luxury brands, so one of our core customers is Fendi. In fact, we produce 100% of their tags. They said, why would it not be the case that a lady could buy a Fendi handbag, for example, and use that as her ticket and her wallet to New York Fashion Week? Use it as an opportunity to get an upgrade or some sort of VIP experience. And all she'd need to do is be carrying her handbag. So we took that and again realized that the obvious locator for this technology was the tag itself, but we also needed to make sure that the simple things like inventory management and control were first and foremost fundamental, and then we could lead into those types of experiences for the consumer, and then go all the way back to source tagging, which would be attached to the garment label and therefore would save cost for the brand. But also you'd be able to do things like, in our case with Seafolly, we've said, well, we want to know at what process the cycle of manufacturing is at. So it's often the case that whilst you're here in Australia, you're trying to work out at what level your manufacturer is. They're telling you that the goods are on the dispatch dock, but actually they're in the wash cycle, for example. We can start to see those things optically through this type of system.
The journey Seafolly's on, one of the other brands obviously that I work with is R.M. and while we haven't commenced our journey with RFID yet, I do want to talk to that a little bit, because we are going to do that. One of the challenges, I don't know about if everyone knows about with R.M. Williams, basically we can make you any boot. So you can go onto our website, you can buy a boot online directly that's made, or we can make you any boot. So you can walk into a store and basically request certain attributes and we can make it for you, right? R.M. Williams has been doing that since the 1930s. So, and not only that, if your boots wear out, like if you go through your soles, we can repair those boots. But part of the challenge that we have at the moment is, that's a lot of boots. As our business starts to scale and grow, and it is, how do we start to track all those boots that are coming back for repair? Or how do we start to tell the customer where their handmade pair of boots is through the journey of being manufactured? Now, we can sort of cheat the system and do that now by sort of saying, we know it roughly takes about 8 weeks to make a handmade pair of boots. We can sort of estimate and tell the customer this is where it is through the journey. But with RFID, in our factory, because our factories are in Adelaide, so we don't manufacture offshore, we manufacture in this country. So through our manufacturing line, we can actually engage the customer further with using RFID. We can actually tell the customer literally in which station their handmade pair of boots is, and when that handmade pair of boots is going to be picked and packed and shipped to them. So we can actually now tell our customer, engage them on that journey of having a custom made pair of boots. Right, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is leveraging RFID technology to support that. So in one of, like I said, Cataden's other portfolios, we're also looking at RFID in how we help tell a story about the quality and handmade nature of their product. So not just Seafolly is looking at obviously RFID, but also other brands in the portfolio.
Sorry, Nat, was there a piece on the smart mirrors you wanted to cover? Or
yeah, look, I'll talk about, I think I mentioned earlier, one of the things in engaging George and the SOLOS team, not just obviously the unique capabilities they have around tag creation and what they can do with tags. I recommend having a look at that if you haven't seen that sort of his capabilities, because it's quite impressive with embedded tagging and how they can be seen into garments and different things. But what we wanted to do was actually learn what else we could do. And so in our store in Bondi, in our Seafolly store in Bondi, we actually also implemented 4 smart mirrors in the change rooms. And basically what those mirrors allowed was a customer could take a product off the rack or multiple products off the rack, and they can walk into the change room and it'll bring up on the mirror the product that they're holding in the change room. Why is that important? So as we go through trying to tie together both our digital and our bricks and mortar, omni-channel, how do we start to tie those journeys together? So when the customer goes into the change room, it would bring up their product. But we wanted to started to create more in-store experience. And instead of, when women go in, buy a bikini or a swimsuit, a lot of the time they might have the kids running around. So instead of them, going in, they've got the wrong size. They could literally, it would bring up their size, all the products that they had in their hand and their sizes. If they had the wrong size, they could literally just touch the mirror. That would notify the sales assistant that they needed, a size 8 instead of a size 6. And the sales assistant can then go and bring that in. So we moved to more of a concierge experience in store in using the smart mirrors. Not only that, the customers could create a wish list and a basket. They could save that, they could share that with other people. So it allowed people to, engage not just with the product, but also share that digitally and help us to start to experiment with what was possible using RFID to drive that. So actually a funny story. We actually had a woman go into the change room. She'd taken a number of products. She had a pram with her. One of the sales assistants went to assist her, and then the customer was leaving the store. And basically, the mirror still said that this particular customer had about 8 items of product, however, wasn't carrying it. So the store staff member said, politely, "Excuse me, I'm not sure, but there's 8 products that you have with you." And she was adamant, no, she didn't. She said, "Well, if you look at the mirror that's in front of you, it's registered all the products, right?" And so then magically out of the nappy bag in the stroller came all the 8 products. So that's an important point, because RFID can not just only be used for trying to tie together your digital and your bricks and mortar journeys, but it can also be used for security. Like the amount of, I guess, applications for RFID around the customer journey, around security, around inventory accuracy, and how we start to tie all these channels together, because it's a challenge for any retail businesses. Trying to tie together your digital and in-store journeys is not simple.
And just on that point, with the tag, if it's cross-stitched into the garment, if you want to steal it, you're literally going to have to cut that tag out of the garment. And that's what we think is critical now, to just get away from the plastic lug pinned through the garment system. It's antiquated, it's been around for way too long, and it's time to move on.
Yeah, and to that point, we would find, even before RFID, you find tags obviously cut off in the change rooms, right, constantly. So that next evolution of embedding the tagging into the product, I think it's obviously, it's inevitable for brands. And the technology's there to do that.
It's interesting, we have a couple of department store representatives here. We often hear the story about, typically in the department stores, behind the mirrors in the change rooms, they pull them back and all of a sudden all these hang tags come falling down out the back, because obviously that's a locator for this. I see you nodding. It's an issue, and it's as simple as that. If you want to take a security tag off a garment, you can go online and buy a $25 piece that'll undo it magnetically, and away you go. Or typically people are going, we heard the story of Seafolly with people going in with foil bags and dropping swimsuits in there and all these sorts of things. Again, one example of the opportunity that this creates.
Yeah, but the mirrors, back to the mirrors again, for us, it was really test and learn, and working with George and Solos. They were, to be honest, they were fantastic in helping us on that journey. Because for us, like I said, we didn't have internal expertise around RFID. We knew what challenges we were trying to solve, and we needed a partner to try to help us on that journey and challenge us as well and show us what is possible with RFID.
And I think just on that point with the mirrors, one of the things that Seafolly was concerned about initially was, they said, look, great to have this experience, but we don't want to take away from the interaction face to face with our staff and the customer. And we sort of thought this through together, because obviously we didn't want you doing anything that wasn't quite correct for the brand and for the brand perception. But what we found was the case, and particularly with swimsuits. A lady's gone into a change room, she's in a state of undress, she's got the wrong size. Wouldn't it be ideal to be able to tap and connect and get that size that you need, as opposed to having to redress and go back out? And typically in summer, your store is very busy, you're very cyclical, and we were finding that people were queuing up to use the change room. So what would happen is that person would have to fall back to the end of the queue. So obviously it made a lot of sense to have that facility, but it was a support service as opposed to taking over from the sales process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was one example of how we sort of tied in together and carefully looked through what was a systematic approach again to the customer. And we're definitely all about RFID for inventory management and control. It's prima facie for us. But we also look at a much bigger picture, and ultimately that culminates in the Internet of Things. Everything's going to be connected in this world, and certainly clothing is going to be a big part of that. Eventually, again, the luxury brands we're talking about, I want one of my customers to be walking down Fifth Avenue and go past a digital sign or a digital billboard, and that to connect to my media, my advertising, my marketing. Again, you're holding the Fendi handbag, should be a Fendi ad as opposed to Gucci or Prada or Dolce & Gabbana. And again, that would be the case for Sydney.
Guys.
So thank you. Any
Thank
questions?
you.
Sounds like you should change your name to NOLOS.
NOLOS, yeah, I actually like that. It's quite good.
Just repeat the question for the people back there.
From the Seafolly store at Bondi, have you removed the hard security tag? So the answer is no.
No.
Not yet. And George, are you suggesting that the way forward with RFID is to remove that physical deterrent, which is the hard tag?
Yes.
I'm just, like the consumer now looks at the hard tag, and yes, it's only a certain percentage that go, it's tagged. I'm not going to steal it.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how the perception for the customer would be. Like, I see that as an increase in theft opportunity because there's no physical deterrent.
That's a very good point, and we considered that from this perspective. We said, if we were to sign right within the store to say that there is tagging technology from a security perspective embedded in the garment, but you don't know where it is, I think it's a lot more profound to do it that way as opposed to a physical tag that visually is, I know where it is and I know how to remove it.
I mean, it's a bit like the Touch ID on phones or the Face ID. The amount of phone theft has dropped dramatically because you can only steal that phone and sell it for parts.
That's right.
You can't unlock it anymore. And so once people know that the tag is in there, then they're going to know, well, I'm going to get caught.
Yeah.
So
It's
Well, you can't, sorry, I'm not.
No, we want to hear these things.
It removes an element of work labour force because you're not having to physically hard tag your garments.
Yeah.
If it comes embedded.
Yeah.
But there's always, obviously, with everything, there's a way around it. Yes, you can take the tag off, and yes, Alex, it's a good point. But at the point that, let's talk about the recidivist offender who's stealing every item of yours in
Yep.
some full size range to sell somewhere else, realizes that it's an RFID label, and really no one can track me because we're not walking around with beacons everywhere going, it's sitting in his house. Like once that gets out, then it defeats the purpose. So I'm just.
But for us, as far as using RFID for future security, we do believe having that embedded and notifying the customers around the fact that that technology is in the garment. I think, I mean, time will tell, right? Whether it will be a deterrent, but
Would absolutely work in a small footprint
Yeah.
store because you've got the timbers
True.
to manage the surface. But I'm a big box retailer, so
Yeah.
I'm going in my head,
Yeah.
21 entry exit points in the store that I look after.
Yeah.
How would that look? And then once that recidivist offender is out there and has worked it out, that it doesn't really matter. I can unsell it within 5 minutes. No one's going to know it's been.
But if your garment, right, is tagged, is embedded the tag, right? Currently, I can walk into your big box retailer, and I can remove those tags, right? You find them all over the stores, right? So a recidivist offender is going to do that anyway, right? If you're using embedded tagging technology in your product, they can't remove the tags anymore, right? So they can't actually even get out the doors without the alarms going off.
And just to add to that, with the overhead technology, working with Intel in partnership, what they built into the system, as a number of overhead suppliers have done, is if you're heading to the checkout, you're fine. But if you head towards the exit, 3 seconds prior to you getting to the exit, the camera comes on, records you and sets the alarms well before you reach that exit point. So they, again, as part of the Internet of Things, and this is where we loved our partnership with Intel because they always look at what's 5 years in advance of the market. They have said, apparel, embedded technology, it's the future. So therefore we should be looking at it as a holistic solution. And therefore we've got to think about things like what you just said from a big box perspective is, okay, now we've got a problem where fundamentally, even if you leave the tag on, how many times have we had the alarm go off at the exit, no one's there, no one's doing anything about it, and the garment's still gone? I think the differentiator here is at least what we've done is we've got a good visual of this, and let's send that direct to the constabulary and see what happens from there. It's got to be better than what we've got now.
can you randomize the location of the tag? I mean, like you were saying before, you could cut the tag out. If it's just in the little bit at the back of the garment, I mean, they could get a little pair of scissors and cut it. But can you randomize it so it's in different spots, so it's impossible for that person to know?
Definitely.
And is that cost effective? Can you do that at manufacturing?
Definitely, and this is what we're working on to a point where eventually we want this to become embedded in fabric. So effectively a fabric is carrying an proportion of tags that will fit in with production. And that will fundamentally shift from time to time. And because it's so thin and so soft and it's really hard to feel that it's even there. Again, fundamentally you're looking for which part do I cut out?
Yeah, and then you've got a garment with a hole in it. And is that tag deactivated at retail? I often see some sort of the
Yes.
stuff. So
Yes.
can the public buy those deactivators?
Well, we spent a lot of time on that particular topic.
Yeah.
So we had to look at encryption from a bank level perspective to ensure that wasn't going to be the case. So that being said, there's all these wonderful things, but the issue now lies for us in the mass production process. So we've gone through the piloting and testing. We worked with a luxury brand, they put it out into the field, tested. It was all wonderful.
Because I'm trying to find a solution to that. To
Yeah,
the ladies'
so
problem.
now it comes to the
I'm
mass
going to
market
sort of
perspective.
pull it in. We're running out of time to
Yep.
respect people's times here. We've got to get on to our last presentation and finish up. Sorry to cut
No,
you
no,
short,
no.
but by all means, definitely, thanks very much. A couple of interesting things. So there are a lot of new people in the room today who have probably never been exposed or been part of an RFID Coalition meeting, and you're welcome from this point to join us. Absolutely, it's a great way to, again, network and meet and do all that sort of stuff. This is just some dates for next year. The key one there is probably the first one of the year, and we'll sort of go from there. So at some point next year, we'll do this in Melbourne. And so again, we'll continue that flavour and hopefully bring it back up to Sydney again soon. The other thing I wanted to just briefly mention, and this is as much for vendors in this room as it is for anything else. When I was in Chicago earlier this year, I met up with a university professor from the University of De Palma, and they actually pulled together a whole lot of information about deployments around the world. So a global picture of RFID use cases and deployments, and what we're trying to do here is, from an Australian perspective, is provide some inputs into that, because we're very underrepresented in terms of activities here in Australia. There's no one really sharing that data. And I know from the RFID Coalition perspective, there are a lot of people doing a lot of things. I could name a long list of them, even if it's that getting a business case together, working in their factory overseas, all those different things. There are Nathan, deployment, etc. So we have a vast range of information we can share and input into that. And what that does, though, is give visibility to what's happening here in Australia, which, again, I think we're a bit underrepresented. So that's something that's going to go on from our perspective. Just as a reminder, the coalition itself is totally voluntary. There's zero cost to get involved. We're here to educate and connect. Privacy is also a key concern. I've got a long list of people that are part of our distribution list. The last thing anyone wants is more spam or more mail in their inbox than they can deal with. And so I'm very, very conscious of communicating anything out from my mailbox to anyone's. So if there's a desire to be excluded, totally fine with that, and I do that on a regular basis. We say goodbye to some, but we welcome new people all the time. And so we'll go through this process of adding and removing some over the next few months. So Marion, who's a marketing team, will be involved in that. I've reused this slide because, again, for those who have never been involved with the RFID Coalition, you probably wouldn't have a concept of what it's actually done inside this sector, inside this industry. And you've probably finished reading that before I even start reading it. So fundamentally, though, we've met a lot of times. We've given all of our partners pretty much an opportunity to do presentations to help you understand how the technology is deployed. We had a great one from Zebra, I think probably 2 or 3 meetings ago. We've had one from Avery around the consumer activation piece, which was fantastic. And the list goes on. Pretty much every vendor in this room has been involved in that particular process of education. So it's not a sale, it's not about what their solution does, it's about how to educate and how to deploy the solutions in your organisation. So that's what our role is. And as you can see, that when the third one from the bottom there, going back to your point, Phil, there are guidelines there that can be accessed. These guidelines have been built and pulled together from both the US and Germany perspective and localised for our own use. The standards are fundamentally exactly the same. And there's a lot of reference material on that site. It's a bit of a dog's breakfast at the moment, but we're sorting that out. Lastly, there's a LinkedIn group that has some information as well. It's very much just, again, excluding of sales. So that's a LinkedIn group that's closed. It's a closed network. We don't see any sales sort of activity in that. It's about educating and helping and presenting information that'll be useful. Okay? And finally, have a great Christmas. Really appreciate everyone's involvement today. This doesn't come together without a lot of work from all the speakers. I'd like to say Glenn from City Chic, I'd like to say Simon from Lululemon, Nathan, thank you very much from Seafolly, and Alex from Maya. So really appreciate you guys, the time you've given. To the vendors that are here, thank you very much from myself to yourselves. Like I said, having this network of vendors doesn't happen very often. I think the vendors that I know quite well would agree it's an unusual and unique scenario to have it. So again, a lot of new retailers that have come today to listen to RFID, the story. I think a lot of people are on their journey, and that's a longish journey. Involves a lot of moving parts. I think I really enjoyed some of the discussions about how many moving parts are going on from a Lululemon perspective. If you can make it fun, that's a good thing. All right, that's it. So again, from myself to everyone here, thank you very much for your time today. I'll talk to you soon.